everyone, and welcome to our video tutorial for this classic button-up bandana that you can see Melba modelling here. So we hope you enjoy it. Please like, share and subscribe, and we hope to see you soon. Thanks. Bye. Okay, so to make this bandana you'll need of course some yarn, and I'm going with this lightweight, probably about a 1 weight cake yarn. It's in 100% cotton. I'm only making a small bandana obviously, so I won't get to see the full colour scheme in my bandana, but it works up nicely into this pattern, so I'm using that today. You can use any yarn that you like, but you'll probably want to stick around the finer weight yarn, and this would look good in a winter or a summer weight yarn. You'll need a crochet hook to correspond to your yarn, and I'm using 2mm. That will focus for me. There we go. Need some scissors, a darning needle, and a needle. You might want a smaller needle to sew on a button. Now I've got a needle that fits through my buttonholes, and I'm also going to sew in my ends with that. So you'll need a button, and depending on the weight of yarn you're using and the hook size you're using, you'll need a relatively small button. So this is a let's say, I can't remember if it's a 15 or 10mm button, but this will fit through the, so we won't be creating a buttonhole as such, we'll be using the gaps between the stitches. So the size of the button will depend on your yarn and your hook size. Okay, for me this works. Actually, let's just quickly tell you what this is. This is a 15mm button. Okay. And for this bandana, it's best if you do have an exact measurement of your cat's neck circumference. Often it doesn't matter and you can kind of ballpark it. You still could with this one, although if you can get an exact measurement, you're probably better off because it's button up. So you want to get quite an accurate, an accurate size. So I'll include in the description box below a guide to standard cat sizes, and you can work off that if you want to or need to. Otherwise, try to get an accurate measurement around your cat's neck circumference, and that will help with where you place your button and how big you make your bandana, or how many rows you continue for your bandana. Okay, so here's an example of the bandana that I've made previously. So you can see at the back it's a button up. And it's designed to have this little fold over under the neck, so it sits like this. And it's definitely beginner friendly. We'll just be making one big triangle, okay? So like this. And you'll go for as many rows as you need to create the size across the neck circumference that you need, across the neck, around the neck. So it's a really simple repeat. We'll be using a slip knot onto the hook, a chain stitch, a double crochet and a triple crochet, and I use US terminology. And then it's just a row repeat. Okay, really simple. It's one of those great projects that I love. You can just kind of you'd be watching TV and you can just go on because it doesn't take a lot of thought. It can be quite meditative. So yeah, just an easy row repeat. Now from there you'll need to know how to weave in your ends and sew on your button. Okay, so you'll really only have one end to weave in, this one at the center, because we'll use our finishing end to sew on our button. Okay, and then you'll just secure it at the back, of course, but we'll double that. We'll use our finishing end to sew on our button. Yeah, so definitely beginner friendly, this one. It's a great one if you're just learning how to crochet. And you'll see, actually, just to mention, you'll see here I'm using the gaps between the stitches as my buttonhole. I'm actually not creating a specific buttonhole. So you do have a little bit of leeway in the sizing, so you can make it slightly smaller or slightly larger, depending on where you place, which stitch gap you use for your buttonhole. So yeah, there is a little bit of leeway in the sizing, but this one you'll probably want to have like I said at the beginning, a pretty close to accurate neck circumference. So let's get started. Okay, so to get started, make a slip knot onto your hook. So there's a few different ways to do that. So you do that in the way that you do it. And then you're going to make a chain of 4. So 1, 2, 3 and 4. Now find that first chain and you're going to make a slip stitch to create a little circle. So slip stitch into that first chain, the furthest chain from your hook, to create a circle. Now you're going to chain 4, 2, 3 and 4. Now that chain will count as a triple crochet and chain 1. Okay, turn your work and into the center of this little circle you've created. Now it can be a little bit tricky sometimes. Sometimes it looks like this is your center next where you've slip stitched, okay, but that's not your center. Just move those chains over and find the actual center of your little circle. So just double check that you're working into the very center of your circle. Okay, so we'll yarn over. We're going to double crochet 3 times into the center of the circle. So that's 1 and 2 and 3. Then we're going to chain 1 and then 3 more double crochets into the center of your circle. 1 and 2 oops, I unsplit there a little bit. Let's just do that last one again. 2 and then 1 more makes 3, and then we're going to chain 1, and for the last stitch in this first row we're going to triple crochet. So yarn over twice, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over, pull through 2. Okay, so at the beginning, and so let's just bring in my other one. So we're starting in the center here and we're working our way out. Now we just want to create, just to help create a bit more length in comparison to the, width actually, width here across the neckline in comparison to the height or this dimension of the bandana. We're going to add triple crochets at the beginning and the end of each row. Now one of those triple crochets will be your chain 3 plus your 1 chain that counts as your chain 1, okay, and then your last stitch in every row will be a triple crochet, okay, and that's just to give us a little bit of extra length, width, let's say width, plus it gives you just this little bit of extra, it helps with the fit around the neck. This is just meant to be a really classic bandana, so it's got that kind of slightly baggy effect underneath the chin, okay, so it sits, kind of like a classic bandana would, okay, so yeah, that's why we're doing the triple crochets at the beginning and the end of the row, or we're doing, the chain that corresponds to a triple crochet. Now this next row we're just basically going to be repeating this row 2 that we're moving on to now. So chain your 4, 3 and 4, so every row will start with your chain 4. In that first chain space, you're going to place 3 double crochets, 1 and 2 and 3, chain 1. Now we're at our corner stitch, okay, so every corner stitch is going to be the same. So you'll place your 3 double crochets into that next chain 1 space. So in this row it's the next chain 1 space, but in whichever row you're at, it's in the corner stitch. Chain 1, and then back in that same space you'll place 3 more double crochets, and that takes us around the peak or the corner of the bandana, so the point of the triangle, the bottom point. Chain 1. In this row we're immediately at the last chain space, so 3 double crochets in that last chain space. 1, 2, let me just get a bit more yarn, 2 and 3. Chain 1, and then your triple crochet at the end of this row. Okay, So now you can see that we're just going to be increasing across and back, and we'll increase by 1 chain space on the sides in each row. So in this next row, row 3, we'll just do the same again, chain our 4, 3 and 4, and we've got our first chain space. So don't forget to work into this first chain space. 3 double crochets. So each chain space, except for the point of the triangle, the turning point, has 3 double crochets in it, and then you'll chain 1 in between each to create your chain space for the next row. 1, 2 and 3. And then in this row I'm at my point straight away, so I'm going to do my 3 double crochets in the chain space, chain 1, 3 double crochets back in that same chain space, then I've got chain 1, 3 double crochets, chain 1, 3 double crochets, chain 1, and then I've got my triple crochet to finish out that row. Okay, so then you're just repeating row 2 until you reach the size of the bandana that you want. Okay, now how you'll work that out is using your cat's neck circumference. Okay, so you'll keep going until you've got the width of your bandana that you'll need for your cat's neck circumference, taking into consideration where your buttonhole will be and where your button will be sewn. Okay, so that's the measurement. Now, you don't usually want to work exactly to your cat's neck circumference because you don't want it to be tight around the neck, okay? So if you want this classic sort of bandana look, you want it to sit a little bit loosely, so you'll add, maybe 1, maybe 2, maybe up to 3 centimeters extra to your cat's neck circumference for this width, okay? And more specifically, between the point where you sew on your button and where your buttonhole will be on this other side, okay? Now, continue on. I'm going to pause here and let you move on and just, create your bandana. Go for as many rows as you need, and I'll go ahead and do the same, and I'll meet you shortly. Okay, so I'm just placing my last couple of stitches here in my last row. I'll chain 1 and my triple crochet to finish off. 1, 2 and 3. Okay, so there's my bandana finished. Okay, so I've got the width that I need for Melba's neck circumference, taking into consideration where I'm going to place the button. Okay, now you'll just here yarn over and pull through and snip off your end. Now I've already done this ahead of time, but I've pulled through, and you'll snip off your end long enough to allow you to sew on your button as well. Okay, it's kind of just a 2-in-1 deal. Okay, I had to join my yarn there, that's why I've got tail end there. So so now we're going to sew on our button. Okay, so take your button and your needle, and you're going to work out where you want it to be placed. So you can take a measurement between, which you probably would have already done. So for Melba, her neck circumference is just under 24 centimeters. So if I place my button here, then there's her 24 centimeters. Oh, let's move this over. There's her 24 centimeters, plus I've got a couple of centimeters extra to get to the buttonhole, and that's how I want it. I want it to sit kind of loosely around her neck. Okay, so we're going to sew on your button. So you'll work out where you need your button to be, and I'm going to assume that you know how to sew on a button. So I'll just thread my needle, and obviously you've got a needle that fits through your buttonholes, and you're just going to weave through on the underside, wherever you want whichever side you want to be your bottom side. So I just weave through a little bit. Just don't pull so tight that you misshape your work. Just keep that nice and firm, but not misshaping your work. And I'll move through those stitches so I get to the point where I want to start to sew on my button. And let's see, we'll just go through. Actually, that's probably getting pretty close. Let's just go just a little bit more. inwards. So then I'm going to just place my button, and I'm going to sew on my button where I need it to be. So this button I'm going to do a little crisscross. So I've got 4 holes in my button, so I'm just going to crisscross. So I'm going to finish off doing this, and like I said, I'm kind of assuming that you know how to sew on a button, and you sew your button according to how many holes it's got, and the type of button you've got. So I'm going to do that. Actually, let's just continue together on camera. Actually, no, my yarns come undone. So I'll meet you once I've sewn on my button, and we'll weave in our ends together. Okay, so I've got my button nice and secure there, and always make sure you've got a really secure, attachment for your button. You don't want there to be any choking hazard, especially if you've got 2 cats and one is trying to bite the button of the other one. So just always make sure that you've got a really good secure attachment there, and then you'll weave your tail end into the back. Okay, so once again, I'm assuming that you know these sort of basic techniques. Let's get that through. It's nice and firm in there, which is good. That's what I want. Okay, so you'll just weave back and forth a few times, and like I said, make sure this one's really secure because of the button. And most of you will be using smaller buttons, so you want to make really sure that that's not going to be any sort of hazard. So I'm going to finish weaving in my ends, and I'll weave in my starting end. So if you've got a little gap in your starting circle, you can close that up using your first tail end, and you'll just work your way sort of around the stitches here, and that will help close up that little gap if you've got one, if you want to close it up. So I've got that tail end. I'm going to finish weaving in this tail end, and I've also got my 2 tail ends to weave in where I joined my yarn. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we'll be right back. Okay, so there's my bandana all finished. I've woven in all those ends, and I've got my buttonhole there. And I can just fold that over underneath Melba's neck. And I love the classics. So this is, I'm kind of like, I also love making decorative pieces, but for Melba, who's a cat that goes, I'm just going to snip those ends off. For Melba, a cat that goes out, out on leash, and she's always hiking with us. I like just kind of useful classics, and that look cute, but this is definitely one of those. So for cats on leash, a bandana, it's decorative for sure, it's a bit of a fashion statement, but it's also a safety item. So if your cat escapes from leash, for example, we really hope that doesn't happen, but if it does, a bright colored bandana can help you locate them more easily, especially if they're hiding in undergrowth and they've got a coat that that it blends in with surroundings. So it's a safety item. Also, if your cat goes out in summer and a cotton bandana, you can wet a cotton bandana just to help keep your cat cool as well. So they're fashion statements, but they're also useful items. So I love these classics. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, especially if you're a beginner. Congratulations if you've completed this as one of your first projects. It is definitely suitable for beginners, so congratulations. And we would love to see your photos, please, especially if it's your, one of your first projects. I would love to see it. So please send your photos along to catventurers.community@gmail.com, or you can tag us on social media at catventurous.crochet. And with social media, you can find us on Pinterest, we're on TikTok, we're on obviously YouTube, we're on Facebook, and we're on Instagram. So you can find us on any of those platforms. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and thanks very much for being here. Bye. Who's that? Down? Okay, good girl.